find my mark here. Let's go!
Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to do our best to do a full breakdown of Anna's proportions, her style, and her color analysis. We talk a lot on this channel about Anna's fashion and what we like, what we don't like, and I thought it would be a good idea to have a full analysis that we can come back to for reference. Now, while Anna is our subject, she isn't really the target audience. I mean, if Anna sees this and finds it interesting, that's awesome. However, my goal is that those of you who watch my content will be able to see how to apply the information in this video to Anna and will therefore have a better understanding about body proportions, the fit of clothing, etc. To Anna, if you do see this, I don't care what you wear. I talk about fashion in relation to you because I genuinely enjoy the discussion. There are body analysis videos done on many other public figures, so please don't think I'm targeting you. I'm simply using you and your channel to create an educational video and hopefully help others who struggle to understand where to even begin with this whole topic. In this video, we're going to do a full structural analysis of Anna's body, how her proportions work, how her mass is distributed on her body, and how those physical facts interact with the clothing that she wears. The goal is to understand what is actually there in measurable terms and then connect that with how garments fall on the body. So we will be using words like width, length, and depth. Everything in this video refers strictly to Anna's physical structure, but really you could take this information and apply it to anyone. So with that long intro, let's jump into this video. To get an accurate view of Anna's proportion, I have taken screenshots from her two most recent YouTube videos. They're not perfect, but I wanted photos that were recent and ones where she's wearing tighter clothing so we can really see the outline of her body. One front view, one side view. I have placed dots on key points on her frame, and when we take away the photos underneath, we are left with just the dots. This approach really helps us to separate any sort of measurements from Anna's body and see them objectively. So let's break down what we're seeing. Let's start with the front view. When we compare Anna's shoulders, waist, and hips, her hips are clearly the widest point laterally. Based on proportional comparisons, her hip width is approximately 22% wider than her shoulder width and 32% wider than her waist width. Her waist width is about 93% of her shoulder width. Now, a couple of things. People often say that the widest point of Anna's body is not her hips, but her thighs, that her hips sit higher, and that is technically true. Anna's hip bones hit higher than the widest point of her body. However, when it comes to body measurements and garments and all of that, we measure high hip and low hip. High hip refers to the measurement where your hip bones protrude, and low hip generally refers to the measurement that sits at what is usually the widest part of your hip measurement, extending around back behind your seat. So sometimes when we talk about hip measurements, we will be referring to high hip and sometimes low hip. In this instance, we are comparing her shoulders and waist to her low hip measurements. And as a caveat, I have to estimate placement. Because of Anna's size, it's basically impossible to know exactly where her bone structure sits. So just as a preface, if the dots are slightly off, it is what it is. It really won't affect things too much. The measurements tell us several important things. First, Anna's waist definition is not created by extreme narrowing. The waist exists because of curvature, because her body moves inwards and outwards smoothly, and not because the waist collapses sharply inward. She doesn't have a super snatched waist. Her waist definition is inverse, meaning it's the result of hip width decreasing rather than converse, meaning the waist is the controlling factor in terms of body measurements, i.e., her hip measurement is her most prominent feature, not her waist measurement. Second, her shoulders are not dominant. They are decently narrower than her hips and softly sloped rather than sharp or blunt, so they don't visually counterbalance her hips on their own. From the front, Anna's body reads as lower body dominant, with a continuous rounded silhouette rather than having sharp or angular features. Now, let's talk about Anna's vertical line. Anna claims to be 5'10" most of the time, and she looks tall. Measured from shoulder line to the floor, Anna's vertical distribution looks roughly like this if we are estimating. Shoulder to waist is approximately 24% of total height. Waist to high hip is approximately 11% of total height, and then high hip to floor is approximately 65% of total height. Now that last number is important. Roughly 65% of Anna's height comes from high hips down, which places her well above the average for leg length. Many population averages sit closer to 55 or 60%, and even some fashion blocks don't really push past 62 or 63%. So, yeah, Anna has some long legs. At the same time, her torso, especially her waist to high hip, is very compact. The waist sits relatively low, much closer to the hips than the shoulders, which visually shortens her midsection. Now, Anna has always claimed to have a long torso. I have seen people in my comments dispute that, and the numbers show that the commenters are correct. Anna has a short torso and long legs. So why does Anna say that she has a long torso? Because of the way Anna carries her weight, it creates the illusion that Anna's stomach sits lower than it does. This often happens with people at a higher weight. Anna's lower hip measurement draws the eye downward, and it feels like the torso is extended much further than it is. Add to that the fact that to the eye, Anna's legs begin much lower than they actually do. It's easy to see why one would think Anna had a long torso. And to make matters even more confusing, Anna often wears cropped, tight tops. This makes it feel like her body is just too long for the clothes that she's wearing. However, when we remove Anna's body from the equation and focus just on the measurements, we can see that Anna does, in fact, have a short torso. These things create a very specific combination. Vertically, Anna is leg dominant, but horizontally, Anna is hip dominant. So Anna's height is carried primarily in her legs, but her visual center stays very low because of how wide and deep her hips are. Anna's side profile is where we see how much three-dimensional information is missing from a lot of style advice. A lot of times when people are giving advice, they're just looking at you straight on, but people are not 2D, they're 3D. So from the side, Anna's greatest projection outward is again at the hips, but this time in depth rather than width, meaning not all hip measurements accommodate for a deep posterior. Anna's hip depth is approximately 1.39 times her abdominal depth, and her hip depth is approximately 1.82 times her chest depth. Basically, the posterior projects backwards significantly more than the abdomen projects forward, and far more than the chest projects outward. This tells us that Anna's mass distribution is posterior weighted. She has more in the back than in the front. So, juicy booty confirmed, Anna. Depth matters because garments have to travel around your body. If depth isn't accounted for at the hips, fabric tends to pull forward or ride up in the back regardless of size. So, when Anna orders pants that look like they will fit from the front, but they don't account for depth in the back, it's no wonder why they don't sit right on her body. When we combine what we see from the front and the side, the same conclusion shows up twice. Anna's low hips are the widest point laterally and the deepest point front to back. That makes her pelvis the dominant point of her body. To make this more useful, we can translate these proportions using a reference height of approximately 5'10". Based on that height, Anna's shoulder to hip length is roughly 24 to 25 inches, and her hip to floor length is roughly 45 to 46 inches. Using an estimated shoulder width based on her height of roughly 19 to 20 inches across, that would make her waist 18.5 to 19 inches across, and her hips 24 to 25 inches across. But because of depth, these circumference expand significantly, meaning that these would be Anna's approximate measurements. Her bust would be roughly 45 to 49 inches, her waist would be roughly 40 to 43 inches, her hips would be roughly 53 to 58 inches. The key point here is that hip circumference is driven by both width and depth. Two bodies with the same hip measurement might need very different garment shapes depending on how that measurement is distributed around their body. Now, I would like to point out that these measurements are approximations based completely on the two images I showed at the beginning of this video. We know that this was post-liposuction, and we have recently learned that Anna has been on a GLP-1. And on top of that, in these photos, Anna is wearing compression. So, I do think there have been times where these measurements were much bigger, and I also think the measurements would shift slightly if we were to lose the compression. However, for the purposes of this video, I think these measurements work well enough to get the point across. So within traditional fashion shorthand, Anna would be described as lower body dominant, often labeled a pear or triangle shape. Now, I know that Anna hates the fruit system, but I do find these labels to be reasonably helpful when applied correctly, so I'm not going to shy away from using them. Within some more structured systems, Anna's traits would be Tall vertical line, pronounced pelvic structure, and soft flesh over a strong underlying frame. If you are at all familiar with the Kibbe body system, this places Anna closest to a soft dramatic with some overlap into a flamboyant natural. Honestly, the label is much less important than what it emphasizes, which is length plus curve with visual weight carried low in the body. So, what does this mean for Anna? Anna's body requires clothing that accommodates hip width and depth, maintains a vertical continuity, and reinforces the upper body enough to balance out her lower body. That's why certain silhouettes consistently work better on her, and we're going to go through some specifics now. Overall, we want to emphasize vertical line, long, uninterrupted lines from top to bottom, upper body presence, structure, drama, openness around the neck, shoulders, and chest, and waist definition, not overly tight, but some shaping. And we want to avoid things like crop tops, boxy or straight cuts, low-rise bottoms, excess bulk at the hips, and tiny details that look fussy or cute. Now, the reason for avoiding small details is that Anna's body is large on the visual scale. That does not mean fat or big. It means her proportions are broad and long and deep enough that small details tend to feel cluttered and too busy on her rather than feeling delicate or dainty. Anna's best necklines would be deep V-necks, wrap or faux wrap, square necklines, asymmetrical necklines, really anything that's open and isn't too constricting around her neck, such as crew necks or boat necks or high mock necks. The best tops for Anna would be draped or softly tailored tops, not overly rigid, peplum tops if they're long and flowy, not the short, stiff kind, and bias cut tops, as well as wrap styles. The best sleeves are dolman, kimono, flutter, things that have soft structure, and statement sleeves like puff sleeves. She definitely should avoid things like boxy tees, cropped knits, cap sleeves, and tight ribbed tops. In terms of jackets, Anna's best looks are long line blazers or single breasted coats, waist shapes, belted, structured shoulders, open front drape coats. The longer, the better. She should avoid cropped jackets, boxy jackets, double-breasted coats, and high hip puffers. Now for dresses, Anna looks best in wrap dresses that fit her well and flare out, asymmetric or draped styles, long, dramatic, flowy skirts, and off-the-shoulder cuts. She struggles with shift dresses, sheath dresses, things that are cut very straight on her, bodycon dresses, and short tunic styles. Her best skirt shapes are long and drapey, A-line, full and dramatic. Anna should avoid short pencil skirts, structured pleats, and anything with pockets that fall right at the hips, as well as skirts with seams that hit right below the hip. Pants are a difficult area for Anna. I do think she has unusual measurements when it comes to pants, making it harder for her to find pants that work right off the rack. However, her best styles are high-rise, wide leg but not too stiff, boot cut, if fitted properly, and palazzo styles. She looks better with a flat front rather than pleats, long line, even ground skimming over ankle length or cropped, and she should avoid skinny jeans, low-rise cargo pants, and paper bag waists. In terms of print, Anna suits medium to large print, bold prints over tiny florals, as we already discussed, and she looks good in high contrast details. Overall, I think Anna suits long and dramatic, yet not too overly structured looks. She looks good with clothing that's a little looser, a little bit flowier, yet there should be some structure. Short, tight cuts tend to work against Anna's body, while longer, more flowier looks feel more natural. Now, Anna often compares longer, looser clothing with frumpy and unflattering cuts, things that are unevolved, but I think this couldn't be further from the truth. I think Anna looks her best when she lets fabric drape over her rather than trying to squeeze into it. And this has nothing to do with her weight. Because of Anna's height and width, and I mean frame width, not fat, she feels suffocated in smaller, tighter looks. If she was 150 pounds, this would still be true. Now, let's talk about color, which is one of the defining elements of Anna's personal style. What consistently sets her fashion apart is her love for color, and more importantly, her instinct that she looks good in it. I think the visual evidence and the data support this. Anna almost always looks better when she leans into bright colors. Anna's coloring aligns most closely with light summer, but not the soft pastel version that people often think of. Very light, powdery, cool colors. drain her and they make her feel really dull. Instead, Anna thrives in the more saturated and lively end of the light summer color palette. This is also why Anna can successfully borrow from neighboring palettes. Because she leans cool and has a high tolerance for saturation, Anna can pull select shades from the light winter palette, particularly bright, cool jewel tones that are bright rather than heavy, not too inky or dark. In the same way, her natural vibrancy allows her to borrow from light spring as long as the colors remain vibrant and not overly warm. For a time, I thought Anna didn't look good in cool colors, but that was because I saw her in pastel cool colors, and I thought it was the coolness of the colors that was wrong on her, but really it was the pastel portion of that. What Anna needs is chroma. Now, chroma refers to how clear or intense a color is, how bright, how saturated. Anna looks best in cool leaning, bright colors. Where Anna consistently struggles is warm, earthy tones, specifically like autumn colors, think rust or mustard yellows, muted olives, some warm browns and warm oranges. They just look off on her. This effect is amplified when those warm colors are paired with a warmer toned hair, creating an overall look that just feels slightly off. In fully warm outfits, Anna's vibrancy seems to fight the clothing instead of being supported by it. She just doesn't look great in really warm colors. That being said, Anna isn't strictly cool. She looks best in cool leaning colors, but she's able to function as a cool leaning neutral, adding some warmth to her palette, as long as those warm colors are bright and lively. Warmer shades can work on her when they're bright, fresh, light, but once they become too saturated and warm, they actually overwhelm her, and that's when the colors feel just off on her. In short, Anna's best colors are clear, vibrant, saturated, cool leaning colors, and she shines when her palette supports that visual energy rather than softening or dulling it. I'll be honest, a lot of this is pseudoscience, okay? At the end of the day, people generally look best in the clothing that they feel comfortable in and like. And I would encourage anyone watching these types of videos to not take them too seriously. At the end of the day, your clothing and style are meant to complement you, and there's no need to fit into any box. However, I personally find that taking data and extrapolating usefulness into practical application can be incredibly helpful. So, while I don't think anyone needs to be out there calculating their circumference to find out if a wrap dress will work on them, I do think it's fun to be aware of the data that exists out there regarding the shape and fit of clothing. And for anyone that just finds themselves lost in the fashion game, just know that there is someone who has already done the math for you. While it's true that everybody is unique, most of us do fit reasonably well into the categories made by people who know more about garments than we ever will. So, going forward, I want to use this video as a template, a guide for measuring Anna's outfits and hauls. Based loosely on the science, fallible though it may be when applied, we can reasonably understand why certain things look great on Anna and why some things just fall flat. And maybe this information will help someone else out there. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you all next time. Bye!